Napoleon was short. Vikings wore horned helmets. Medieval knights were so heavy in armor they couldn't get up if they fell. Ninjas crept through the night in black suits. And the atomic bombs ended World War II. Every single one of those things you were probably taught, things you've repeated to other people, is either completely false or far more complicated than you've been told. Today we're opening the files. 5 military myths that history got wrong. And once you understand how these myths started, you'll understand something important about how history gets written in the first place. Myth 1. Napoleon was short. Let's start with the most famous man-sized misconception in history. Napoleon Bonaparte. Short, temperamental, classic overcompensation for his height. Except Napoleon was not short. Historical records place him at approximately 168 to 170 centimeters. In modern terms, 5 feet 6 inches. The average height of a French male in Napoleon's era was approximately 165 centimeters. Napoleon was above average height for his time and country. So where did the myth come from? 2 places. First, a measurement conversion error. When Napoleon died in 1821, his physician recorded his height as 5 feet 2 inches in French units. The French pouce, their word for inch, was slightly larger than the English inch. British commentators saw 5 feet 2 and converted it using English measurements. They got a much shorter number. They published it, and nobody corrected them for 200 years. Second, deliberate propaganda. Britain and France were locked in a war that lasted over a decade. The British could not beat Napoleon on the battlefield, so they attacked him on paper. The caricaturist James Gilray, one of the most effective propagandists in British history, drew Napoleon repeatedly as a tiny, raging figure, always dwarfed by taller British officers, always throwing tantrums. The character was called Little Boney. Napoleon himself reportedly said that Gilray's cartoons did more than all the armies of Europe to bring me down. He understood what was happening. History didn't bother to correct it. One more detail. Napoleon's personal imperial guard, the elite soldiers who surrounded him at all times, had a height requirement of at least 1.76 meters, nearly 5'10". Stand a man of average height next to a formation of guards who are all taller. He looks short. Napoleon wasn't short. He was standing next to unusually tall men, surrounded by propaganda that said he was. Myth 2. Vikings wore horned helmets. Ask anyone to draw a Viking. You know what appears on the helmet: horns. Here is what the archaeological record says about Viking helmets. Exactly 1 nearly complete Viking Age helmet has ever been found. 1. The Geirmundbu helmet, discovered in 1943 in a burial mound in Ringerike, Norway. Dated to the 10th century, it has a rounded dome, a nose guard, no horns, no attachment points for horns, no indication that horns were ever present. Fragments of several other Viking helmets have been found across Scandinavia, in Denmark, Sweden, Norway. None of them have horns. Not one. So where did the horned Viking come from? A German opera. In 1876, the composer Richard Wagner's epic Ring Cycle premiered at the Bayreuth Festival. The costume designer Carl Emil Doppler created dramatic theatrical costumes for the Norse characters. He gave them horned helmets, not because they were historically accurate, because they looked dramatic on stage. Artists and illustrators loved the image. Children's books adopted it. Films amplified it. Merchandise sold it. By the 20th century, the horned Viking was so embedded in popular culture that correcting it seemed impossible. Here's the practical problem with horned helmets that should have raised questions earlier. Horns in combat would catch weapon strikes and potentially pull your helmet sideways. They'd snag on low door frames and rigging on ships. They'd make hand-to-hand combat actively more dangerous for the person wearing them. Viking warriors were pragmatic professionals. They wore functional iron helmets designed to deflect blows. They did not wear 2 large protruding horns that any opponent could use against them. The actual horned helmets found in Scandinavia, the Viksu helmets, date to approximately 900 BC, nearly 2,000 years before the Viking Age. They were ceremonial religious objects, not battle equipment. The horned Viking is a creation of 19th century romantic art. It has no relationship to actual Norse history. Myth 3. Knights couldn't get up in armor. You've probably heard this one. Medieval knights in full plate armor were so heavily encased in steel that if they fell off their horse, they lay helpless on the ground, unable to rise, like an upturned turtle. This is completely false and provable. Full plate armor from the high medieval period weighed between 15 and 25 kilograms. That's 33 to 55 pounds, distributed across the entire body, shoulders, chest, back, arms, legs, by a system of straps and padding. The weight was far better distributed than a modern soldier's combat load. A fully equipped U.S. Army soldier in Afghanistan typically carried 45 to 55 kilograms of gear, most of it on the back. Medieval knights trained in their armor from childhood. By the time they were adults, moving in plate was second nature. In the 1480s, a German knight named Heinz Talhofer produced a fencing manual, a how-to guide for armored combat. It shows knights performing throws, ground wrestling, and close-quarter strikes while fully armored. Agile, dynamic, nothing like an upturned turtle. Museum demonstrations with accurate reproductions of plate armor have repeatedly shown that a person of reasonable fitness can do jumping jacks in plate armor, climb a rope in plate armor, roll, rise, and sprint in plate armor. So where does the helpless knight myth come from? Partly from ceremonial parade armor, which was indeed heavier and more restrictive than battle armor, and partly from the cinematic image of the exhausted knight who has been fighting for hours. In that condition, yes, getting up is hard, because you've been fighting for hours, not because of the armor. The medieval knight was among the most physically trained human beings of his era. The armor was the tool of a professional who knew exactly how to move in it. Myth 4. Ninjas were black-clad assassins. Every action movie, every game, every piece of popular culture. The ninja, dressed entirely in black, silent, moving through darkness, killing people. The historical shinobi, the Japanese term for what we call ninjas, were something much more interesting and much less cinematic. They were primarily intelligence operatives. Their main job was information gathering, infiltration, and disruption, not assassination. And they were almost never dressed in black. Here's the logic problem with the black suit. If you're trying to blend into a Japanese village, a market, a castle, in the 15th or 16th century, a person dressed entirely in black stands out immediately. The whole point of the shinobi was not being noticed. They dressed as peasants, Buddhist monks, traveling merchants, musicians, or women, whatever allowed them to move through the target environment without raising suspicion. The best intelligence operative looks like someone who belongs there. A black-clad figure moving at night is useful for very specific scenarios. Not useful when you need to spend 3 days inside a castle gathering information. So where did the black suit come from? Kabuki theater. In traditional Japanese kabuki drama, stagehands wore black to move props and assist actors on stage. By convention, understood by all audiences, a black-clad figure was invisible. Not actually invisible, theatrically invisible. When ninja characters appeared in kabuki plays, they were played by actors in the same black stagehand's costume. The theatrical convention of black equals invisible transferred to the characters, and from there to popular culture, to Western cinema, to video games. The actual shinobi were farmers, craftsmen, and intelligence specialists. Some clans, most famously from the Iga and Koga regions, trained for generations in specific skills. But those skills were primarily disguise, psychology, and information. Not the spinning kick that ends in a black-clad figure vanishing in a puff of smoke. Myth 5. The atomic bombs alone ended war. This one is the most contested on this list. And it matters, because the myth shapes how we understand nuclear weapons to this day. The standard narrative: the United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, and Nagasaki on August 9th. Japan surrendered on August 15th. Atomic bombs ended the war. Here's what the timeline actually looks like. August 6, Hiroshima, an estimated 70,000 to 80,000 people killed immediately. August 8th, the Soviet Union declares war on Japan and invades Manchuria. August 9th, Nagasaki, an estimated 40,000 people killed immediately. August 15th, Japan announces its surrender. Notice what happened on August 8th. Japan had spent months hoping the Soviet Union, which had remained neutral in the Pacific War, would mediate a negotiated peace with the United States. Japan wanted terms, not unconditional surrender. When the Soviets declared war on August 8th, that hope was gone. The Soviet army tore through Japan's Kwantung Army in Manchuria in days. Japan had been heavily firebombed throughout 1945 with conventional weapons. The March 1945 firebombing of Tokyo killed more people than Hiroshima. Japan had absorbed that without surrendering. Japan's Supreme War Council was divided between those who wanted to continue fighting and those who wanted peace, both before and after the atomic bombs. What changed in the final days, according to historians including Tsuyoshi Hasegawa, was not just the atomic bombs. It was the combination of the bombs and the Soviet entry. The bombs eliminated the possibility of holding out with conventional defense. The Soviets eliminated the possibility of a negotiated exit. Together, they ended the war. This does not diminish the devastation of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It adds to it by being more accurate about what actually happened. The myth that atomic bombs alone ended the war is also politically convenient for a narrative about American power that doesn't need to acknowledge Soviet involvement. History is often more complicated than the convenient version. Napoleon's myth was created by enemy propaganda and a measurement conversion error. The Viking myth was created by a theatrical costume designer in 1876. The knight myth came from ceremonial armor and film. The ninja myth came from kabuki theater stagecraft. The atomic bomb narrative oversimplifies a multivariable situation for political convenience. 5 myths, 5 completely different origins. One thing in common. Someone benefited from the simplified version. Britain benefited from a short Napoleon. Opera audiences preferred dramatic horned helmets. Films needed helpless knights. Action movies needed black-suited warriors. Political narratives needed a clean cause and effect for Japan's surrender. History doesn't write itself. It gets written by people with interests. And the myths that stick are almost always the ones that serve someone's interest in sticking. If this video made you question something you thought you knew, that is exactly what Battlepedia is for. Subscribe and hit the bell. Every week we go back into the record and check what actually happened. Drop a comment. Which myth surprised you most? See you next week.